Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Cinema Condition, a podcast devoted to analyzing films and what makes a movie a movie. I am your host, Raul Alejandro Mendoza, a filmmaker and film critic. Today, I am joined by Alejandra. They are a English major, and today they have selected West Side Story. Hey, Alejandra, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Yep, back again for the last time for season two, and today we're going to talk about a movie that I haven't seen since I was a kid. It was a long time since I've seen this movie. So I would practically say that this was a first time watch for me because I remember seeing this in music class when I was in elementary school. So, whew, it's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely been a while. I think um I think the first time I watched this movie was maybe like 6 or 7 years ago. Because as you know, I started really getting into musical theater.
Yeah.
So I mean West Side Story is one of those that you can't really like skip or avoid. Um so I watched it and I really liked it back then when I watched it. And then when I started thinking about it, I was like, wait. But for the most part, I think, I mean, I still love it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And just so we don't confuse viewers or listeners here, we're talking about 1961's West Side Story. We're not talking about 2021. I still have yet to see the remake, but I know you'll want to bring up a little bit of stuff in the actual conversation. But today we're talking about 1961's uh, version of this film, which the first adaptation. I'm sorry, not the version. Is the first adaptation of this movie, and yeah. How have you been as of late? We haven't seen you in a long time, so I want to get caught up here with you. How have you been?
Well, I mean, okay. Nothing much has happened. It's been chill overall, I think. I've been trying to expand my movie catalog because usually I only just like stayed with the things that I was interested in and I would watch them. But now I'm trying to let the algorithm guide me into things that I might have not known before.
Yeah,
So, uh, yeah,
you're trusting the
it's been fun.
algorithm, huh? You're trusting the algorithm.
I'm trying to. It's really hard for me because I don't usually take recommendations on anything from
Yeah,
anyone. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, I mean, whenever I open Netflix and then there's like a new movie there, I'm like, okay, let's watch it. Let's see what this
yeah,
is, and then I know, you know.
yeah. I saw your post today, and I was wondering what the hell. Who the hell is recommending you to watch Cannibal Holocaust? Because holy shit, like who's actually what's it called recommended you that?
Yeah, I mean, God, it's so horrible out there.
You got some people say, recommend you some crazy stuff. I mean,
Yeah, because I mean, I
oof.
don't know, especially now with like Halloween season,
Oh yeah,
um, people start bringing up like horror movies. You know, there's like compilation posts
yeah,
with people say like, oh, horror movies that are actually scary, and you go and look, and it's like Hereditary, and I'm like, okay, sure,
sure, Jan.
because
Yeah,
yeah, sure. Like, I don't know.
yeah.
But then people in the comments are exactly like that. And they're like, oh, that's not even scary. You should watch a Serbian film. And it's like, girl, I'm not going to watch Serbian
You
film.
want me to fucking what's it called? You want me to be disturbed for the whole night and just come on, man. Um,
Yeah, it's weird.
God. Yeah, that's no. Like, sorry, man. I don't want to. What's it called? Like, yeah, I don't. It's not about even being depressed, dude. I don't want to be fucking disgusted with myself. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
I just watched The Others with Nicole Kidman, and
Oh, yeah, I love that one.
I thought it was really good. And I was like, low key, some of this movie is like this is kind of scary. Like the extent that this mother is able to like control her children and like now that's just scary, man. Like, oh my god, it's I really liked it. I thought it was really good. But of course, yeah,
Yeah, I really like that movie too. Because I think most people are not like I think their concept of horror is more towards like blood and guts and
Yeah.
violence, and I mean I didn't really like that.
Well, they
Um,
forget that horror
so
isn't specifically like stuff like that. Horror is just supposed to provoke thought. You know, something that provokes thought that
yeah,
deals with like all these different realms of like supernatural or something like that. But something it first has to provoke some sort of thought. And yeah, I think that people kind of lose touch of that, and they'll be like, "Well, have you tried watching like the Halloween films?" It's like, okay, man, but like that doesn't actually like scare me. Like I'm just laughing at
yeah,
how you know.
I think that's what happened with the Babadook, for example.
Yeah,
That some people were really hating on it because you don't even see the monster, and it's like you don't need
I
to.
think that's what's
Like that's not
scary.
the point.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah.
yeah,
I have yet to see the Babadook though, but I'm just saying, like, isn't that what the scary part is? Like, you can't see this thing that is supposed to be haunting this child. Like, come on, man. I keep advocating for some sort of media literacy in the world, and I every day I find out that it's not there. It's not there. But
yeah, yeah. Same.
last time Julia was, I'm sorry, not Julia, Alejandra was here. We went for a long time, and Alejandra said that she doesn't want to do that again. But that's kind of what happens when you have two people who really like to talk. So before we go like really deep into this, I need to do my introductions. Oh my god, these two dudes have so much information that I made a ginormous introduction for both of them. So what I'm gonna do is I'm literally just gonna talk about the director's introduction, and I'm going straight into the film introduction because I would love to have like a conversation on these two people if you know them. But holy crap, the amount of info that they have is crazy. But yeah, Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins. So as I did for the filmmakers of City of God, I am doing a introduction for both of them. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about first the filmmaker known as Robert Wise. Robert Earl Wise was born on September 10th, 1914, in Winchester, Indiana. His pastime included going to the movies. During his time at Cornersville High School, he wrote comedy and sports columns for the school's newspaper. He attended Wise College, where he initially sought out a degree in journalism. He had to drop out due to his family's bad financial situation during the Great Depression, so he moved to Hollywood and began his career in the film industry. He worked in the shipping department at RKO thanks to his brother who worked there before him. He began his career working in music and sound editing at RKO and then became an assistant to TK Wood, who was the studio's head sound effects editor. His first screen credit was a short compiled by abandoned footage from a feature film, A Trip Through Fiji Land, from 1935. Once Wise gained more experience, he wanted to work in editing film content as opposed to sound, so he started to work for William Billy Hamilton. His first film content as opposed to sound. His first film as assistant to Hamilton was Alfred Santel's Winter Set in 1936. His first feature screen credit was a shared credit with Hamilton for The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1939 and Fifth Avenue Girl in 1939. On the other hand, his first solo credits came from Bachelor Mother in 1939 and My Favorite Wife in 1939 as well. In 1941, he worked with Orson Welles by editing Citizen Kane and was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Film Editing. Robert Wise learned a lot from Welles, like deep focus techniques that he would use later in his career. He worked on Welles's next film for RKO, The Magnificent Ambersons in 1942. He shot additional scenes for the film as well. Wise continued editing films until he got his first directing assignment, The Curse of the Cat People in 1944. He was very attentive to detail, and his films dealt with issues of racial tolerance. His other work included The Body Snatcher in 1945, Born to Kill in 1947, Blood on the Moon in 1948, The Setup in 1949, The Day the Earth Stood Still in 1951, So Big in 1953, and more. In the 60s, he worked on adapting 3 Broadway musicals to the silver screen: West Side Story in 1961, Two for the Seesaw in 1962, and The Sound of Music in 1965. His career spanned many films, including Star Trek The Motion Picture in 1979. He passed away on September 15, 2005, at the age of 91. Yeah. Now, Jerome Robbins was born on October 11th, 1918, in New York City, New York, but moved to Weehawken, New Jersey in the 20s. Robbins began studying dance in high school, where his teacher encouraged students to improvise steps to music. After graduating, Robbins attended NYU to study chemistry, but dropped out after a year because of financial reasons, and he wanted to pursue dancing full time. Senya Gluck Sandor inspired him to pursue ballet after joining the dance company. He made his debut in a Yiddish theater production of the brothers Ashkenazi in a small role. During the early 40s, he created Fancy Free, a ballet with a screwball comedy plot about sailors on leave. He commissioned the score for the ballet from Leonard Bernstein, who was not as well known at the time. Throughout the 40s, he continued to work on ballets based on several important social issues. In 1957, he conceived, choreographed, and directed the musical West Side Story. He created it as a contemporary Romeo and Juliet set on the Upper West Side. The music was done by Leonard Bernstein, and it also marked his first collaboration with Stephen Sondheim, who wrote the lyrics with Arthur Lawrence. West Side Story earned Robbins his second Tony Award for choreography. He was called to testify before the House Committee on Un-American Activities because he was suspected of communist sympathies. He refused to name names, but 3 years later, because of being threatened with being exposed as a homosexual, he released the names of several actors, critics, filmmaker, and more working in the industry. His career did not suffer, but those he named were blacklisted. Throughout the 60s, he co-directed the film adaptation of West Side Story and directed several other projects like musicals and plays. He won Tony Awards for his direction and choreography in Fiddler on the Roof. Throughout the 70s and 80s, he continued to work on stage productions and appeared on TV as NBC aired live from Studio 8H an evening on Jerome Robbins' ballets. In 1996, Robbins started to show signs of developing a form of Parkinson's disease. Even though he was sick, he staged his last project for the City Ballet in 98. Les Nos. I'll let Alejandra pronounce that when I'm done here because they're the one who knows French. Jerome Robbins died on July 29th, 1998, after suffering a stroke that month, 2 months after he premiered Les Nos. There's a lot for both of them. And without going into a full on conversation about them, I love that when I was doing my research, none of Jerome Robbins's page ever brought up the fact that he was dismissed from the West Side Story stage set. Because, yeah, and I'll read more about that in the film introduction, but I found it really interesting that they never brought that up. Also, he testified for HUAC, which we just did it. We did an episode on The Hustler, and the director for The Hustler also had to testify in front of HUAC as well. And he didn't want to name names as well, and he ended up naming them. And yeah, it didn't end up pretty for the people who he named. They all ended up getting blacklisted. So it seems that this was a common theme in this time with these directors. Alejandra, I
Yeah.
I saw you.
Yeah, I
I saw
mean,
you smiled. Was it because I didn't say Bernstein? I said Bernstein instead of Bernstein.
no, no, it wasn't that. It's just, I don't know. I think um, a lot of people usually tend to focus more on like the later years of Bernstein's life,
Mm-hmm.
and when he was already like reaching like heights with his work and all of that. But his work with both of these like directors and creators was really notorious, and we wouldn't have West Side Story without
Yeah.
without Bernstein. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, love the guy.
Yeah, that's a name that I've always heard a lot. I didn't know anything about him. Same with Sondheim. I don't know a lot about Steven Sondheim. I know that he just passed like recently, right? But
Yeah.
after watching this film again, I was like, holy shit, man! Like Bernstein's music is incredible. I mean, wow,
Yes. Yes, it
wow.
is. And I mean, I think West Side Story is a really special case because, I mean, Jerome Robbins, Sondheim, and Bernstein were gay.
Oh,
So the three of them were working like together on this film, and it was kind of unheard of that so many like gay people were working in the same project, at least openly gay people, right?
yeah,
Because as far as I know, I think Jerome Robbins was openly gay at this time. Sondheim was very young. He was like 18, probably, which is even more shocking that he wrote this at like 18 or
it's
19. I don't
18.
remember.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
And Bernstein was trying to like keep the gay part sort of undercover, but I mean, just it's not something you can hide, especially not in Hollywood, and especially not in the arts.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and read this introduction I wrote about West Side Story, which is significantly less than what I just had to read. So, development of the film goes back to the executive producer Walter Murch, enlisting the services of Jerome Robbins, who had directed and choreographed the stage version of West Side Story. Robbins, before this, had no previous film experience at all, which led to Murch hiring Robert Wise to co direct and produce because Murch believed he had experience with this type of subject matter in the production. Wise also had experience completing films under budget and ahead of schedule. The film was split where Wise directed the story and dramatic elements, and Robbins directed the musical sequences. Robbins directed his portion of the movie first. There was an unusual number of injuries endured by the dancers. After 45 days of shooting, the production was 24 days behind schedule, so Wise had to dismiss Robbins. The remaining dance numbers were directed by Robbins' assistants. Robbins pushed for Carol Lawrence to play the same role she played in the stage production, but the producers agreed that she was too old to play the part. Some of the cast members from the stage production were in the film: Tony Mordaunt, George Chakiris, Tucker Smith, David Winters, and others. Elvis Presley was approached for the role of Tony, but his manager turned down the part. Other actors considered for the part for Tony included Burt Reynolds, Marlon Brando, Robert Redford, and others. The film won 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actress for Rita Moreno, along with other awards. It became the musical with the most Oscar wins. A remake of the film, directed by Steven Spielberg, was released in 2021. So, Alejandra, um, a lot there. It's a legendary movie. But I'm always gonna ask you and everybody else who comes on this. But why did you select West Side Story?
Okay. So around the time I started getting into musicals, it was, as you know, when Hamilton came out. So Hamilton was a hit because of like the diversity in the cast. So I saw an interview that Lin Manuel Miranda gave about how there weren't a lot of roles for Latinos to play on Broadway. And I started
Mm-hmm.
looking into that, and I found that there were only two at that point, or three, um, Broadway shows where Latinos could play Latino characters. One of them was Chorus Line. There's one Latina in there. The other one is In the Heights by the same Lin Manuel Miranda, and the other one is West Side Story. So I listened to it first because at that point, production had come out from 2008, I think, and the lyrics by the Sharks are sung in Spanish. So that was really cool, and I listened to it, and I really liked it. So I went and watched the 1962 movie, and I didn't think much of it at the time, but when I started looking more into it, and I realized that most of the actors were white, that Natalie Wood was white, and I think the only Latina in an actual like protagonist role was Rita Moreno. I was very confused. So I didn't know what was the thought process here. But then that led me into the rabbit hole of like racist old Hollywood casting and all of that. Because I mean, here in Mexico, we didn't used to have those conversations about like blackface or brown face or anything like that.
Yeah,
So I had to find out from like English media, well, I mean American
yeah.
media,
And that's
and
crazy because
yeah,
Mexico is the country that made Mimi Pinguin.
exactly. Yes. So I mean, we have a lot of instances. I mean, for like Dia de Reyes,
Yeah.
where the guys dress up as the kings, and then there's always one guy in blackface.
Yep.
Yeah, it's wild. It's very very weird. But we just started getting those conversations a while ago, like not that long ago either. Um, so I mean, I didn't know about any of this because firstly I didn't watch a lot of old Hollywood movies, and secondly because I thought it was weird that we were putting people in like blackface paint, but uh I didn't like really associate it with like a long history of this practice, right?
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I saw the interview. I mean, Rita Moreno brings it up every interview she has when she talks about West Side Story, that they put all of them in brown face, including her, even though she's Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
But the director said that she wasn't brown enough, so they put them all in brown face, and you can see it on the screen, like on the
Yes, you can.
Technicolor. It really shows. It really shows.
Well, I'm glad you selected it because, like I said, I hadn't watched this film in a long time. I was a young kid when I watched it, so I technically am considering this a first time watch because when I watched it as a kid, I don't remember jack shit. I have these what's it called, faint like instances, like you get these faint images of when you were a kid of what you remember, and one of them is being in that room watching West Side Story and seeing like the beautiful like sets and stuff. So that's what I remembered. But other than that, like I didn't remember the music. I don't remember the dancing. All I know is that it was I just remember these faint images of when I was a kid and I watched this for class, and
Yeah,
I
and I
loved
mean,
it.
one of the things that really, sorry, like one of the things that really impacted me when I first watched it was that I wasn't really used to watching musicals from like old Hollywood musicals. So they are way more different than the way we do musicals now. Because at that point, I had watched, for example, Chicago,
Hmm.
and Chicago is very different from how West Side Story was done, right? So when I watched it, I found it very funny that you have these gang members that are supposed to be tough and like violent, and they are ballet dancing across New York, and the choreographed fighting and all of that
Yeah,
is really funny.
yeah,
But when you look at it from the point of view that, oh yeah, this was directed by a ballet dancer, and ballet is just, like interpretative sort of form of dancing.
yeah.
So it makes sense, but it takes a while to get used to it, I think.
And such a good movie. My favorite song is Maria. I love that song. That was such a beautiful song. I'll say this
Yeah.
too. It was just I love the choreography in this film, and I loved the cinematography is beautiful. I don't know how he did it, but it's in that there was one scene where she's getting her dress to go to the dance, and she starts spinning around, and she just starts going like blue, like red and green, and then it just morphs into this cut
Yeah.
going into the actual like dance hall, which I was like so beautiful. I was like, I don't know how the hell did, but that was like some of the coolest things I've ever seen, and it's just like in my mind, I'm like, how can you do that like in old Hollywood? Like I don't remember like that being possible, but like it apparently it was because I just saw how it happened right now. But I was like, wow, just incredible movie. I'm glad that I finally got to rewatch it or watch it for the first time as an adult. And I say like, yes, it has a lot of its problems, and we're gonna talk about that in the conversation. But it's such a beautifully made film, and I think it's just What like you know me, I'm not the biggest musical guy. I'm not. I'm not the biggest musical guy. Alejandra tried to get me to listen to In the Heights from Manuel Miranda, and I was like, I'm really sorry, Alejandra. Like, you're cool and all, and I think you're really nice, but like, yeah, this I don't like this shit. Like, this isn't that good. Like, it's not my cup of tea. I think that In the Heights is okay. The film, I like Dancer in the Dark. I like that. I thought that I would love Repo the Genetic Opera because it sounds like my type of thing. I ended up fucking hating that movie. I fucking hated that movie. Across the Universe, I fucking hated that movie too. But this one, I watched it and I was like, "Wow, I fucking love this movie." I was like, I don't know how it's not possible to not love this movie, even with all its problems. Like this movie is just that good. Whenever I bring Alejandra here, I'm gonna guess that it's gonna be a freaking a musical because she just wants me to finally just expand my taste here and just watch more musicals. But I appreciate you selecting this because I really liked watching this.
Yeah, I mean, I think musicals are definitely not for everyone, but I think they deserve a chance
Hmm.
because I mean, there are people who like point blank refuse to watch a musical.
Oh yeah.
But I think that's a little bit weird. So I think they definitely deserve a chance, not because you're gonna like the music, not because you have to really believe like, oh, so she's really singing right now. Like, of course not. It's a musical. That's the point of it. But you have to appreciate all the work that goes into it that doesn't go into just a non-musical movie.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's the thing is like and I like I said I
So
just
you have to train singers, dancers, everything.
yeah, and I wanted to make sure that like to me, musical is good where it's not just singing to just sing. Like it has to push the narrative, and we have to, you know, actually do something with the story with the music, and that's what this movie did, and I really liked it, and I can't wait to have this conversation. So if you're ready, I am ready, Alejandra.
Sure.
This is our conversation on Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins' West Side Story. So we start West Side Story in Upper West Side of New York City. On one side, we have the Jets, who are mostly composed of white, different European descent boys and girls. And on the other side, we have the Sharks. The Sharks are composed of mostly Puerto Ricans. And they're Puerto Ricans that immigrated from Puerto Rico at the time. If I remember correctly, at the time, actually, the Puerto Rican government was basically paying its citizens to get out of Puerto Rico, and they ended up coming over here because they actually had the chance to have a U.S. passport, and they were mostly composed in that side of New York, and from here, the New Yorican identity becomes a thing too after the 60s. But, you know, these two gangs are very opposed to each other. But at a dance, Maria, who is part of the Sharks, and Tony, who's part of the Jets, they lock eyes and they fall in love with each other. And we follow this journey of these two people who are not supposed to be together, but they're fighting to hopefully be. And with that, we open up the world of West Side Story. And one of the first things I want to discuss is the stereotyping in this film because it is, I mean, you have an exaggerated accent on the sharks. I mean, look, man, like a lot. It's, Latinos have accents, okay? We do. If you come from the original place of origin, you start speaking English, you're gonna have an accent. I'm sure that people picked up on Alejandra's accent because English was not her first language. I even have an accent because of the region that I'm from here in Texas, where we have a specific way of speaking. And sometimes, if you notice me when you're looking at the video, sometimes when Alejandra says something, I'll be like, that's because it's something that comes from that area of where I'm from. But point is, we have accents, and there's a lot of things that are kind of exaggerated in this film. One of those things is the way that these Puerto Ricans speak. A lot of it is like, I do not. I do not, and I cannot. I love him, and it's like it's a very exaggerated version. But I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on not just the accent, but really the whole idea of the stereotypes in this film.
Um, yeah, I mean it's one of the elements that is definitely most exaggerated, but also I think it's deeply put into the dancing and the music because I mean even in the costuming that they all wear,
Mm-hmm.
like the Puerto Rican women are wearing like these sort of like rumba like dresses, like lots of frills and very colorful,
Vibrant
and the
colors.
white girls, yes, and the white girls are wearing like more typical like American fashion, right? um the dancing, I mean you can see it, that scene in the at the ball, like the gym sort of thing, when they start dancing mambo, and the
Mm-hmm.
sharks are the only ones who know how to dance mambo, the white girls don't, so they're just like moving, like doing things, but it's not actually how you dance it, right? So there's of course that divide, but also the way that the mambo dancing is portrayed. Like yeah, of course it's supposed to show that the Puerto Ricans have like sort of more like Latino culture within them as opposed to the others, only like separating them further, I guess. um but I don't know, I mean it's it's that, the accent, and it's also the way that the police treats them
Mm-hmm.
within the movie, because the police are not nice to either of them, but they're worse towards the sharks than they are towards the jets, obviously.
Yeah.
Uh, so, um, I mean, really, the police is kind of like the outsider society that's supposed to want to impose order and solve this gang problem, but they are racially biased still.
I thought it was so interesting too, because not just saying that like, it's only on the Puerto Ricans on the Sharks, because even the Jets like they kind of talk like this, like a little wise guy, like and I was like, okay, so they're also kind of exaggerating it too, like the whole like oh New Yorker like type of accent
Yeah.
that they have, and it's like okay, so like they're not just doing it for the Sharks, they're also kind of doing it for the Jets too, but we also the gang, the whole idea of the gang here, like I thought it was interesting because like it's 1961, the shooting in 1960. You would think like, oh, I want them to look like the typical like Puerto Rican gang member, and they don't kind of look like that. They just look like your regular run of the mill tough guys, and even though they're putting them in these violent roles that are like, what they're always kind of deemed like the Latino role, that is like the stereotypical role of the gang member, but they're not just basing their whole identities over that. Like a lot of their ideals are not even revolved around the gang. It's just something that they honor because of their familial type of bond with these people, but we also kind of have the idea of like Bernardino also being very cautious about his sister, and Chino also like wanting to uphold the values of arranged marriages, and you have all these different things that like yes they're kind of soaked in this stereotypical like gang member role, but they're not one-dimensional characters.
Yeah, because I think, for example, I think Anita would be the easiest character for this because there's a name for this, like the spicy Latina
Yeah, the
character.
spicy Latina. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have a name for that, right? That she's this bombshell and she's hot and she's like, she's Latina, the most important part. And she's just there to be like eye candy, basically. But in this movie, she has a really important role, and I think she's like the voice of reason
Mm-hmm.
in the film, because she's always trying to mediate, like living or trying to start a new life in New York versus not like letting go of the fact that she's never going to be the same as the other white Americans that live there. Like she knows, even though
Mhm.
in the movie they try to play it like, oh, only the men are aware that they're Puerto Rican and the women are like dreaming and they're like idealistic and all that. But I think Anita is really aware, even though she's trying to be hopeful about it, and the men are not because the men are defensive.
She strikes me as like she's the immigrant who's like, yes, I know where I come from, and I came over here, but like I want to start this new life. Like I want to, you know, not just not assimilate per se, but I want to make sure that my life here is different from the one that I just left behind. And she is not completely her leaving behind her culture, but it's saying like, hey, I'm in this new place, and we have to kind of find a way to make ourselves comfortable here because every day we're being reminded that we are different. We are different from them, and I like, and that's why I love that the whole like "Women in America." I like that whole song because it's just her kind of like pushing, like, guys, wake up! Like, we're never gonna get that back. There's a reason we never get that back from Puerto Rico because we left it, and we we're not leaving our culture. We're just trying to start a new life, and with that, you start this new version of your culture.
Yeah, and also she really just wants to like participate in the whole thing. And honestly, I think Anita is the one of the characters that has like the most notable arcs throughout the movie, because she starts like, yeah, she's Maria's friend, she's dating Bernardo, and then everything goes to hell. And then I mean, when she goes to the shop and the Jets try to rape her, it's absolutely horrible. And
Yeah.
one of the most like shocking things, you can hear the tune of America playing in the background of that scene. And that's crazy because she is really trying to, throughout the movie, she's trying to be a part of the new society that she's living in. But that society is not letting her.
Yeah.
So like it really doesn't matter how hard she tries, right? Because it's pretty much out of her hands. And like I was saying, like she could really easily be this stereotypical spicy Latina character, but she's not.
Hmm.
So that's really interesting too. And like you said, I mean, the sharks, they are not dressed like these tough Puerto Rican dudes. They're just dressed like normal young guy in the 60s
Yeah.
look, which is also, I think, trying to show that, um, I mean, Latinos are not from an entirely different universe than Americans are. Even today, I mean, there are people who come here from the US, from the UK, and they're like, so you don't all wear like embroidered clothes? And it's like, girl, no, we don't. Of course not. Like, you wear jeans? Yes, we do. Right. So it's kind of like trying to set them all in the same space, because they are not like, I don't know, like
We're not
aliens to each other.
anomalies. Yeah, we're not
Yes.
anomalies here. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and I, like I said, like I think I like, and I appreciate the way they kind of approach it because like not everything is stereotyped, right? Because like there's never a moment where Anita is like keying somebody's car because she got so mad at somebody. She's not lighting somebody's house on fire, or like dressing so overly sexualized and where she's being eyed by her like the she the moment that she goes into that shop and she's getting threatened to be raped. She's not even, what's it called, like dressing like provocatively, right? She's just in that dress that she's always been in, and it's kind of like you said, reminding her like this place that you're trying really hard to fit in. It's like it's still not gonna love you, and even though you do have a point that you do need to try to find a way to find your comfort here, there are gonna be parts of this new society that you're trying to find a home in that it's not gonna want you, and it says a lot about the immigrant experience, and a lot of that idea of like forced assimilation and wanting to leave your culture for the hostess culture. And it just I think that the things that it stereotypes, even though it is problematic, right? But I think that it does it to the extent where it's not entirely trying to insinuate that it's problematic. More, it's like, hey, I'm doing this for a reason because because this is kind of the way that people like the Jets look at these Puerto Ricans.
Yeah, I mean, mm, one of the things that a lot of people were talking about was America, precisely like that number.
Hmm.
When she says at the beginning, she says she calls Puerto Rico an ugly island or something like that, and she's like everything is bad and everything sucks there, and it's all better here. But in the remake, they got rid of that part,
Yeah,
so you don't have Anita like hating on her homeland, right?
yeah,
She's just saying like I'm trying to do better here, and that's okay, and it's not an issue that I want to do that, right?
yeah.
Um, but I think it's a really interesting number. America specifically is a really interesting number because you have like both of these like opposing sides of the argument. Like, okay, we can make it here, and the guys are already like defeated about it because they are the ones who are more deeply meddling with the violence and with the contact with other people who don't like them. Right,
Hmm.
like they are the ones who are like fighting with the Jets all the time. They're the ones getting called on by the police, all that stuff. And the women, they are like witnesses because they are dating some of these guys, but they are not very actively participating in the gang. Like the girls on the Jet side are also not really participating in the gang. So they are kind of watching, but the guys are the ones who are more aware of their position in the world, or at least that's how they're trying to show it in the movie. Because you have this number, America, and you have the Officer Kropke number that the Jets sing when
Hmm.
they're like, "Oh, we're gonna send you to jail and to see a psychiatrist, a social worker, and nothing works because you're ruined." Like that's basically what they're saying because they know how they are being treated uh, by society in general.
And I thought it was interesting, and we'll go ahead and talk about it now. It's you can't ignore the obvious thing in the room, and it's the brown face. And I think so. Of course, when it means about this film, you have to kind of approach it with the time. And yes, in this time, there was a lot of this going on. There was a lot of this going on. But what I think is just interesting is just the idea behind it. It's like, oh, Rita Moreno is just not brown enough. She's just not enough for this role. And look, what Rita said after the criticisms of In the Heights was not good, and I completely understand. I completely understand what people had wrong with it. After seeing this film and seeing the idea of like her not being brown enough, like I kind of understand where a bit of her frustration was coming from, because it's like, hey, I was put in a film where they said where I'm as Latin as it can get, and you can see it in me, and I speak with an accent, and still they told me you're just not Puerto Rican enough. You're not round enough, and we have to darken you up because you don't fit this stereotypical look of what I think a Puerto Rican looks like. And of course, it falls back on this idea of like that we think that the diaspora just falls into this one specific look, and it's kind of not, because as you people who are watching this right here, you have somebody who's a Mexican and you have a Mexican American over here, and let me tell you, we're not brown. We're actually pretty white here, yeah. But there's others who look darker, and there's some who are fucking black, and there's some who are Asian and Latino at the same time, and it's like this spectrum. But it falls, of course, the brown face does fall very does not fall far from the tree of the practices of Hollywood at the time. I mean, Bernardo is played by Shakiris, who's fucking Greek. He's Greek. He's Greek. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the brown face of this, on the brown face slash the black face of in this film.
I mean, just I don't know. I think there was a thing in movies at the time where they didn't really want to confuse the audience, and they wanted to be like really straightforward in what they showed in movies, for the most part anyway. um, and by putting all of these characters, specifically Rita Moreno, in brown face, even though she's Puerto Rican, it was to also put the characters into this stereotype that they are not only being discriminated against because of where they come from, but also because of how they look. Because they are trying to say like, oh, if you are Latino, but if you look a little whiter than them, then you should be okay. Like, don't worry about it. It's kind of giving that suggestion. Because, for example, Maria is never really like mistreated
Mm-mm.
by the others. Um, Even though she's Bernardo's sister. So she should be, by theory, but she's never really like looked down upon by the others or anything like that. Uh, because I mean, even though they put Natalie Wood in brown face too, she's comparatively like in her factions, like her face, she is like closer to the Eurocentric ideal of beauty that would have been popular and is still popular. Uh, for women, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even though she's brown, she's like, she's thin nose and like big eyes and all that stuff. Whereas even like with their hairstyles, they put Natalie Wood in like these light brownish hair with like the curling ups, and Anita has really dark hair and it's short and it's like wavy, so it kind of has like that sort of more liberated feeling. So there, and also like the other girl, I think her name is Consuelo, the other
Mm-hmm.
Puerto Rican girl, also has that sort of hairstyle that Anita has, but Maria doesn't. So that is kind of the other stereotype there, that like if you look a certain way, you're gonna get clocked and you're gonna get mistreated and you're gonna get discriminated against, and it's up to you to decide how you're gonna react to that. Uh, so it's giving a lot of like mixed messages here,
Mm-hmm.
because on one side it's trying to be progressive and show that yes, these are gangs and yes, they hate each other, but one of them is actively racist towards the other and the others are defending themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? They are really making clear that point.
And I thought it was really interesting because 1961. If we're basing this at the exact time that this film was coming out, they're not exactly segregated by force. They're more so segregated by choice. Because in the ball, they're
Yeah.
not separated. They're not told like, "Hey, this is a ball for whites only," which I thought was a really interesting choice by Robbins. Because I mean, it is his original work, but I would have thought, something like Robert Wise, who was very known of like discussing these type of issues, he would have like brought that into the film. But like you're saying, it's not entirely like this like stereotypical thing. But like they are browning them up. But there's things that they're trying to be progressive about, and there's things that they're like, well, you're still gonna get like, what's it called, looked at different by the police, and but and you're still gonna what's it called, have a hard time with assimilation, but we're not gonna segregate you. Like the segregation is more by choice, and it's true. I mean, and I can't deny that. I'm sorry. I live in America. I live in the United States. I'm from a town where it was primarily Mexicans, and Mexicans specifically stick to a certain part of the town. And even here, where I currently live right now, there's a part of the town that's Mexicans. There's parts of towns where it's Salvadorians. You have a part of the town where it's mostly black people. You have parts of towns where it's mostly Asians, Venezuelans, whatever. It happens. And more is that now. It's of course more of that is because of like the history of the United States, but also a lot of it has to do where communities find themselves comfortable within their own community, and they're going to have those sectors that are there. So I thought it was just interesting because I know they always make that joke of like, you always got that one white boy that what's it called, always hangs out with the Mexicans and he thinks like he's one of them. But like in this movie, they're separated, and it's not because of any law; it's by choice.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, well, okay, so if we do set the movie in the year it was released or filmed, so in New York, segregation laws stopped around 1952, two probably, for like clubs and like social situations. But not everyone started implementing like
Mm-mm.
mixed sort of places
Especially for
immediately, of
Latinos.
course.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, especially for Latinos. So at this point, even the guy who's organizing the event is like, "Oh, why don't you like mix?" And they're like, yeah, no, that's not gonna happen." Um, because they are unwilling to, but again, the motivations are really different on both sides. Like one side hates the other, and the other ones are trying to defend themselves,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So that is why, like, the sharks, I think, have more of a justification on being exclusively like tight knit and close together, because they need to protect themselves from everyone, not just from the jets, but from everyone. And the jets are just really like wreaking havoc everywhere, and being openly like racist and hateful towards the sharks, right? And terrorizing the neighbors and all of that, and nothing, because if you notice, the sharks never actually attack the local people who live in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually the jets, the ones who arrive to the basketball court, and they kick the kids out, and they steal the paint and they do stuff around the place. They are the ones who do that, and they never get like, they don't get arrested, they don't get like even called out for it. No one gets arrested in this movie, but the sharks are always being like uh judged more harshly for defending themselves against
Mm-hmm.
what the Jets do.
And it's like I noticed like what's it called, Anita's character, Anita, Vito Moreno's character, she like she doesn't like hate Tony. She doesn't like, she's looking out for Maria because she wants her to be safe and she wants to make sure that she doesn't get hurt because like she sees what the Jets are capable of, but she's never just like don't see him because he's a shot like a jet. He's just like, you need to be sure that you're okay and you're safe. Whereas like Bernardo is more like, no, you gotta stay with your own kind and you gotta make sure that we're. And it's like, but you're right. You know, there's you know, the Jets are more of the aggressors, where the Sharks are more over here like, hey, we're kind of what's it called, just trying to defend ourselves because like we've already had it rough. We just had to leave our homes. We had to leave our families, and we're here in this new country, and you know, we're now being terrorized by y'all, and we have no reason to be terrorized by y'all just because of the way that we look and the way that we are. And I thought that was just like, I thought that was just like interesting way to like portray that, especially with um with the way that it relates to those stereotypes that they bring up in the film.
Yeah, and I think it's a little clearer in the remake,
Mm-hmm.
because in the opening scene of the 1962 version, we see that the sharks and jets are fighting, and we like, it's just okay, they hate each other or whatever. But in the remake, we see that the jets steal paint from somewhere else, and they go to this yard where the sharks hang out, and they have a huge mural on the wall
Mm-hmm.
of the Puerto Rican flag, and it has, I think, Pedro Albizu on it, and it has like something about Puerto Rican independence written on it, and they splattered paint on it, and they try to cover it, and they ruin the mural basically. And so the sharks arrive and they start fighting. So it's really made clear what the conflict is about,
Yeah.
that it's racism basically. And uh, it was there in the original, but I think a lot of people missed it, because I
Yeah.
think a
It's more
lot of
subtle.
the, yeah, but also I think a lot of the audience is really like liberal. So they're like, violence is never the answer. And sure, but I mean, there's violence and then there's defense, and the violent ones are the jets, and the ones defending themselves are the sharks. But it's like, no, but they should have never engaged. Like, shut up. Like, it's not that easy. It's not that simple, and you're missing the point. And I'm really glad that the remake really showed that the true motivations behind both of these groups too.
Yeah. And I also wanted to bring up Just so like you would think. I thought it was really interesting that they also like the violence isn't like really that harsh. You know, it's not the most violent film you'll see, but like it's more so because it's like nobody gets shot, you get stabbed, but like you kind of are reminded like this is a musical. We're trying to keep this like kind of like a beat in a way too, where it's like yes, the fighting is so choreographed and it looks like really choreographed, but like even the violence, like the stabbing is like very choreographed and you're kind of reminded like yes, like it's very violent, but we're trying to make sure it's not like this crazy violent thing. We're kind of like really making these people out to be like super dangerous.
Yeah, because I think it's hard to miss out on the fact that all these gang members were no older than 20.
Yeah.
Like they were teenagers basically. And I know it's hard to miss that because I mean the actors were like in their late 20s or 30s when they starred in this film. But and also I mean I don't know what it is about like people from the 50s, but they always looked older than they were. I don't know. But I mean, do you believe that Natalie Wood is 18 years old? Of course
Nope.
not. But none of them are that much older. And I think it's really easy to miss out on that fact. But also, they are teenagers. And the way they are being treated by society, by police, by each other sometimes is baffling. And how, I mean, the Jets, they mention it in this song, uh, the Officer Kropke song, when they're like, oh, my dad does drugs, and my sister is a prostitute, and my grandma sells drugs too, and all these things. Like, you are looking at a wider issue that is
Yeah.
not exclusive to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And I think that song, a lot of people don't like that song. I don't know why. But I think it's really important because, yes, they are racist. Yes, they're hateful. But the racism is not something you're born with. And when you're a young man without a proper sort of guidance into the world, you are going to blame someone else for whatever is wrong with you, and it's not going to be the people that have supported you throughout these hard times. It's going to be the other. Always, it's always going to be the other. It's always going to be someone else that is not part of your group, of course.
Hmm.
So at this time, it's just a normal response, I think.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up the American Dream here, the way that it's a movie that has deals with immigrants, so of course we're gonna talk about this. I mean, they're always talking about like how we're here for a better life, like we left Puerto Rico because we had to come here, we have to make better of what we had because we had a different life back there, and it's like kind of reinforcing this idea of like the United States as this like prosperous land of opportunity. And like I said, it juxtaposes really well with the actual place that they're in, which is like this place where they're facing so much racism, so much violence, and they're not feeling accepted. Instead, they're being forced to assimilate instead of being what's it called told to to embrace their culture.
Yeah, I mean, something that was really left out from the movie, the 1962 movie, was the fact that the Upper West Side at the time was starting to get gentrified.
Mm-hmm.
um, so the government just basically tore down a lot of slums in that part, and they turned it into what is today Lincoln Center, right? So it's one of the posh areas of New York. And
Yeah.
you have these poor, because they are all poor, by the way, all these poor people living in this
Mm-hmm.
area of New York, and they are getting actively pushed out. And that, of course, imposes a lot of stress on everyone. And they don't mention it in this film, but they do mention it in the remake. But in this film, they don't mention it. And um, they really focus a lot on like the wonders of American capitalist society.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and well, they say it in America, right? The cars and the washing machines and the skyscrapers and all of that. And they are being confronted by, yeah, I mean, all of this exists here, but it's not for you because you don't have anything that can give you access to that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think one part that was really sort of, I guess, to not make them overly empathetic, was the fact that the Jets were also descended from immigrants.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, white immigrants, but immigrants still. And their families also had, like, I guess, some idea that their children would be happier and better, but they ended up living in the slums. So it's just sort of like a blanket statement over all of these characters that they are hugely disappointed with the reality that they encountered when they actually got to the United States or when they grew up in it, and they realized that none of what was being advertised after the war was going to be easily accessible for them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for example, well, there is a line in the remake that I think it's the inspector or the police guy, uh, and he says it to the Jets, and he's like, uh, basically berating them, and he tells them that you are the last of the Caucasians who couldn't make it. So he's really like, it's true.
People forget the way that the Polish, the Irish, and the Italians were treated in the United States, and it was
Yeah.
nowhere near being the same systemic treatment of brown and black folk in this country, but they were not liked. They were not liked at all. They were very much like separated, and that's why a lot of them lived in slums because they were not provided the opportunities that those of like English descent were.
Yes, for sure. And I think it's really important to remember that all of them are living the same. I mean, they're basically all in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
They are like pushing each other deeper in the shit that they're in,
Yeah.
without realizing that maybe if they, I mean, this is going to sound so cheesy, but if they worked together, they could have found a wider community for their own support.
It's cheesy, but it's true because the American dream is not this dream of working hard, and it's a dream that promotes capitalism. And
Yeah.
capitalism is the reason that racism exists, is the reason why all these different things exist. And it pushes it and it pushes it and and it reminds these people like, yes, you're on the same boat, but don't forget you're white. So you have the advantage over the brown people. So you can stand above these brown people. And and even though we're gonna treat you like shit, don't forget you're white.
Yeah, and also I think that the American dream is highly individualistic,
Oh yeah.
and these people, both groups, are living in a community. They
Mm-hmm.
are very community centered, and they work together, and they don't leave anyone behind. And that's not the way to make it in American society. Like, you have to be just you for yourself, and that's how it works. And it obviously doesn't work for them, because they need this community to feel strong, to feel supported and empowered. Both of them, not just the sharks, but both of them. Because lest we forget, they are teenagers that whose parents are not around, whose parents might be abusive,
Mm-hmm.
whose parents might be alcoholic or dead altogether, or in another country, or don't speak English, but they're absent in one way or another because we never see the parents. We hear Maria and Bernardo's dad, I think, at one point when he's calling Maria to go inside the apartment, but we
Mm-hmm.
never see him because
I
he's
always
not
think
there.
I always think that's such a choice to do that when these films it's like the parents are nowhere to be found. It's like I I understand why, but it's just like I always when movies do that, I'm always like, oh, well, that's an interesting choice. And I keep saying that today in this conversation, but it really is an interesting choice because it's like especially with the community that you're representing, this community that like values the word of their parents so much. It's like they're nowhere to be found. It's like what?
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, it's weird because in this version, the dad, I think, is the only one who is there. But also, where was he when Bernardo died, and where was he when Maria was trying to run away with some guy? Like, where was he, right? Um, but in the remake, I think they say that the parents died or something. I don't remember exactly
yeah,
that detail, but I remember they give a justification for why they're not there. But in this version, the father is there, so what is he doing, right? And I think, and also they Tony mentioned his mom, I think, um, but we never see them because, again, I mean, we are really in this situation where these teenagers are left to fend for themselves, basically, and they didn't have anyone support. They didn't have their parents' support or societal support or even the authorities or the government support.
yeah.
So yeah,
It talks a lot about how they're. I know that we crossed this one out already. We talked about this topic, but it does say a lot about how people end up in gangs. They don't have
yeah,
support systems and they feel alone, so they find community and solace in these gangs, and because they're able to feel connected to them, they start doing these things and and find themselves in a life of crime. So it's very on brand with what's going down in this movie, and it shows that like, hey, like, yes, if we all were actually together instead of separating ourselves, but most importantly, if they gave a shit about you when you were growing up, maybe you wouldn't have to find yourself in a gang.
yeah. And I mean, they say it basically at the beginning of the show with the Jet song, and you're a jet all the way from until you die, or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. Like that's the message that they're giving. Like this, we're friends, we're family, we're together, we keep each other safe, and we're all we have, and that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And I think like this sort of absence from the parental figures is also tied to the fact that this is, and a lot of people forget this, this is a Romeo and Juliet adaptation.
mm-hmm.
So the parents in Romeo and Juliet are also not there. Like they are sort of, they're like in their own thing, so they don't know that their 13-year-old children are about to run away together. Like they have no idea what's going on, and until the end when they realize it, right? So this element of like really leaving the teenagers on their own is eventually what makes it what like leads to the end, basically.
Yeah,
uh, but yeah, I mean, and we see it with Maria and Tony. I mean, Bernardo is the only one looking after Maria in a very like overprotective way. Sanita is like, yeah, I mean, you do you, but don't do anything crazy. And Bernardo is really like the overprotective sort of figure. Um, but when both of them meet at the dance, it's like this moment. I mean, you see it on the screen. Like everything is blurry, and they can
mm-hmm.
only see each other, and it's very like, oh, ethereal and cute. Um, and again, Natalie Wood, I think, was in her 30s, so you don't believe that she's 18, obviously. But if you try to suspend your disbelief for a second and you think that she is, it's a really impactful moment because she has always been, or it's implied that she has always been overprotected by her parents or by Bernardo, and now it's for her first time out on a wider society that is not only with her own group. And obviously she's going to see a guy and be like, oh, okay.
Yeah. That's why she's so excited when they tell her like, "What's it called? Tonight has to be perfect." And it's like, why? Well, because this is the start of my new life in America, and it's like I'm trying. I'm finally not going to be like held to to the eyes of my parents, and I get to actually be out now, and I actually get to go dance, and I get to do all these things that in Puerto Rico I wasn't allowed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's yeah. I wanted yeah. Now you brought it up. Yeah, like we'll talk about Tony and Maria. You know the whole star-crossed lovers kind of thing. But yeah, because yes, it is a adaptation. It's basically what's it called retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but it's not a faithful retelling because Maria doesn't kill herself at the end. Like no, like she's still alive. She's holding on to his lifeless body, but like she doesn't kill herself. So, but I guess in a metaphorical sense, part of her is killed because it's like wow, like it's like, oh, you guys still, you guys resorted to this and all, but it's I thought that scene was so beautifully crafted, just the way it kind of like everything goes dark, but it's also blurry, and it's just God, I loved it. And then of course the like that there's a stereotype there, guys. It's not the stereotype about culture, but it is like the stereotypical like love story here. You have the Romeo and Juliet love story, and it's like they always like I'm gonna run away with you, and we're gonna escape this, and it's like, dude, you're 18. What the hell, man? You're supposed to be teenagers. Like you don't have it like all figured out where you can just move out, like like run away with each other. Uh, but it's still very faithful to that idea of like Romeo and Juliet, and like they're like, oh, our rebellious defiance is going to be us loving each other because they don't want us to be together because we're not supposed to be together, but somehow we're gonna try to find a way, and it's like sadly it doesn't end up like that. Tony gets killed, and Maria doesn't end up with Tony. I wanted to know if the remake did anything different with the ending.
Not really. I mean, I think the ending is such an iconic scene
Yeah.
that it had to stay the same. I mean, basically. But oh wait, in the end, I think they arrest Chino.
Chino.
I think the
Okay.
police does arrest him. I think. Uh, but it's pretty much the same. Although there is a difference in the way that Tony and Maria are like the way that their relationship develops, because in this movie we see that it's been like 2 days and they're like ready to run away, but in the remake they give them a little more time,
Okay.
and
Cool.
they actually go out on like dates and stuff,
Yeah.
and they talk their like the ways that they're different and all of that, and they eventually decide to run away. But yeah, the ending is pretty much the same. And also, yeah, like you said, there is definitely a part of Maria that has died. And she says so herself. She's like, oh, because now I can hate, basically. Because she didn't go into this experience as like a prejudiced person. Like she was trying to keep an open mind, even though she was raised with the sharks and she knew that the sharks felt some sort of way about the jets and all that stuff. So she didn't want to live like that. But then they basically forced her into hating the others, basically.
Yeah.
And uh, this part in the end where all of them are together and they lift Tony's body, I think, and someone comes and puts like a shawl on her, and it's one of the jets, and it's like, oh, this moment of unity. Uh, that I think the reason why it's so shocking to them is that not only did they see uh, Tony as like the model jet guy, but because he wasn't even in the gang anymore, like
Mm-hmm.
he left. So they like the guy, but he didn't have to die, basically. And uh, it also comes on the heels of having seen Riff be killed and then Bernardo be killed. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone is like dropping dead, and like they don't really know how to deal with it, because not only were they like the leaders, but they were also their family, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of encouraging them to like that sort of rock bottom and wake up call and be like, dude, what are we doing? Like what's what are we doing actually?
Yeah. It's like in a way as well. Like they kind of think like, and I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong here, but it's just like, dude, we literally left this country because like a lot of like violence in our country, and like we're just kind of remaking this, and we're just kind of reshaping this new place that we're in to be what it was that we left. Like so, like we didn't end up leaving anything. We ended up just bringing it with us and establishing it here.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think that Tony, for example, he after he leaves the gang to become like a regular guy, he's really trying to start a life that is closer to what he would have liked all the time. And Maria is barely just getting started. So how can she know like even though she knows again the sharks, she doesn't really know what life is outside of this little group. So she's like the new generation because she's younger than Bernardo and she's younger than Anita, and she has this new like perspective on life that they don't really have. um but she loses it at the end again. So that sucks. uh but I think in the remake, they do something really interesting, and that's the fact that Bernardo is like a boxer. He like
Mm-hmm.
does like box fighting, and I don't know, and so he's like really buff, and he's really like bleh. And Riff is not. I mean, Riff is this like thin, sort of like wobbly guy, but
Scrawny, yeah.
yeah, but he's just as violent as Bernardo is. So the remake is way more violent, not in a graphic way, not that they show any blood or like carnage. They do, but not a lot. Um, but in the way that the fights are shot, because the fights are choreographed, but not like ballet choreographed, right? Um, so it's different. The way they show the hate they have for each other is really interesting in the remake, but also the way they shoot the love that Tony and Maria have for each other is different,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in the remake, they have Tony fresh out of jail because apparently he killed someone during a brawl with the Jets. So he goes to jail for assault, and he comes out and he wants to be like a good guy. So he's afraid of fighting. He doesn't want to fight anybody. And when him and Bernardo are about to fight for Maria, he doesn't want to. But Bernardo is provoking him and poking him, and Tony ends up beating Bernardo up. Uh, and he's like all like bleeding on the ground, and he stabs him, right? So he's really traumatized. He has PTSD basically, and I I think I like that they did that with Tony because it makes sense. It makes more sense that he would want to move on from
Yeah.
that violent past and do something new with his life. Uh, and also something much better, the fact that they all look like they are young people,
Yep.
for
Yep.
one. Because I mean, Rachel Zegler was 17, I think, when they started shooting West Side Story. So
Yeah.
I was so glad. I was so happy about that. Anyway, you really do believe that they are young and that they are doing really fucked up things that no young people should ever be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and the way that they fall in love is yeah, really like a thing of the moment. And then also Tony was being really weird, chasing Maria down, looking into all the apartments to see if he found her. Like that's creepy. Don't do
Yeah.
that, okay?
Yeah, don't do
Um,
that.
yeah, don't do that. I mean, apparently she didn't have a problem with it, but come on, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
When you're young, you kind of let a little bit, a lot of stuff that you find out is creepy when you're older. You let a lot of things
yeah,
slide, and it's like you have time to reflect when you're older, and you're like, yeah, that dude did that. It was kind of weird. You shouldn't have been doing that.
yeah, for sure. But also, it gave us like one of the most iconic musical numbers
Oh yeah.
for a couple on musical theater, which is obviously Tonight, which is
Hmm.
an amazing,
Oh, I
amazing
loved
song.
it. Yeah, I love that song.
Uh, yeah, it's such a beautiful, romantic, gorgeous song. Um, because they are saying it in the song as well that they have discovered like a new world and new possibilities and
Yeah.
all of that. And I think it's not that they are in love because you can be in love with someone you just met, but it's more they are uh, trying to cling on to the idea that they can escape.
And I wanted I know we kind of talked about it a bit, but we're almost done here. But I really wanted to bring it up because, because of course there's things that the culture keeps a strong hold on to, and one of it is gender norms, and gender roles. But I thought it was really, really the way that they kind of bring it up in this film is very different because it's not supposed to be saying like, "Oh, you're a woman, you have to look after me and stuff." It's more of saying like, part of you of not forgetting your culture is remembering your place as a woman. You're supposed to like look after me. You're supposed to be of service to me. And being saying just because you're in America now doesn't mean you can forget your place. And it's like, and even Rita goes like, we're in here, we're in a new place. That's how we're supposed to do it now. And it's like, to Bernardo, he's like, what the hell? It's like, that's why women back over there are better than here. And it kind of like plays into this idea of like Latin America and like being this place where like, oh, the women are more subservient over there. And it's like, well, they have more possibility of being more submissive because they don't let them do anything else. And like, once they come over here, they start like once they come over here, they start like loosening it up because they realize like, hey, I can actually be seen as an equal.
Yeah, I think gender roles are a very interesting part of this movie because, yeah, like you said, it's not that anyone is actually telling the women that they have to serve or like cook or do anything, but
Mm-hmm.
it's more that they know that they have that role because in America they sing about like washing machines and like
Mm-hmm.
you know, so they kind of know, but they hope that in the United States it would be different, that they won't have to be like only housewives,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for example, in the bridal shop where all the women work, and you know the boss is a woman, so she owns the shop, so she's a working woman basically. But she's older. She's not as pretty as the young girls. She's like kind of bitter and kind of strict and all that stuff. And all the others are, they're young, they like to dance, they like to sing, so they're not going to be the same as this like career woman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also, I think one part is when Tony and Maria are having like their little fantasy wedding at the bridal shop, and he goes like, "My mom is always in the kitchen," and it's like, "Okay,
Yeah.
okay, Tony,
Okay, Tony.
um, sure, Tony." Uh, but I think again, like one of the most noticeable roles of a woman is Anita, obviously, um, because again, she's really trying to sort of she's trying to keep Maria safe, but also she's trying to be a little conservative with her because she's like, no, you're not gonna wear like a really like sort of uh, provocative
Yeah.
dress.
Revealing. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not gonna be revealing at this dance, right? Uh, and uh, you have to wait until you're older, and you're gonna dance with who your brother tells you to, like all that stuff. Even though she's a bit rebellious towards Bernardo, I think he's not trying to force her to be in a submissive position
Mm-hmm.
because I think if he dates her, he must know that she's not submissive.
Yeah.
Uh, but also, he's trying to also be a little conservative about it. And in, for example, in the remake, Anita has this dream of having her own boutique. She wants to open her own like bridal shop or like dress shop. So she cooks, she looks after Bernardo and after Maria and all of that, but she has like this dream of making a career, right? Um, and I think it's really interesting that they took that choice. But also, if we go back to the original and we see her like being an employee and all of that, and I think she's trying to push Maria into that direction as well, to have a job, to like do things for herself and all of that.
Yeah.
Um, but she doesn't get to, sadly.
Yeah.
At least not in within the story, of course. But I think Maria is one of the most interesting uh, female roles as well because she doesn't seem to have a lot of agency in the movie. It's like everyone just brings her to places and takes her to places and does things and says things around her, and then things just sort of happen to her. And it's not until the end when she actually makes the choice to confront everyone and
Mm-hmm.
tell them, like, look what you've done to me.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
It is kind of like makes it realize like maybe Tony's death is like was needed because it's a formidable part of her for her to realize like I am my own person and I deserve to be treated as my own person. And I don't have to like be this version that you all want. Like he loved me for being me. He didn't love me because because I was around Bernardo and Bernardo was treating me like this. Like no, he loved me because I was me. And
Yeah.
yeah. But the final topic I have here, and it's a small topic, but I really wanted to bring it up because it was something that like yes, at the time, you don't really see a lot of interracial couples, but it's actually it's happening in this movie. I mean, it's a white guy and a Latina, and like you know, it's not entirely like super brown and super white, but um, he's like it's actually being brought up here, and it's a lot of this movie does kind of bring up like you have to stay with your own kind. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, of course, in a way, it's saying like the sharks, but they're actually saying like, no, you can't, what's it called, date or marry like, what's it called, a white guy. Like, you have to be with your own kind. We have to kind of like stick together. And part of that means that you cannot date outside of your own community.
Yeah. I mean, I think back then, obviously, it was really weird. I mean, you were just coming out of the segregation period,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of shocking to show that on screen.
Mm-hmm.
It, I mean, I can imagine it must have been really shocking to see that, like an interracial couple, not necessarily like a black white interracial couple, but it must have been interesting to see. And just the fact that both of these gangs are really like so segregated from each other, and that there's no possibility for like integration or like conviviality between each other, because they
Mm-hmm.
just don't want to be around each other. So because I don't think anyone ever really berates Tony for being with Maria, but Bernardo is mad, and Anita does like
Mm-hmm.
sort of scold her for being with Tony. But Anita doesn't do it out of nowhere, because she only does it after Tony has killed Bernardo. So it's more of a reaction, like uh this guy sucks because he's just like the others, like him.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't be with him, of course. And I think nowadays there's still a lot of that, because I mean, we see it all the time, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, my partner is white and I'm not. And they're like white, like white,
Like,
British white,
oh
like
God.
whitest, pasty blue eyes. And I mean, uh, it's it has its own challenges, because I mean, culturally and holiday wise, like our interactions are really different in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still like that sort of reaching across the fake artificial divide of racial like hierarchies and ethnicities and all that stuff that are of course part of who we are, but they are not the only thing that define us. And I think for Maria and for Tony, they were also going into this relationship with that mentality of like, I don't care like what you are, because I see you as a human being, as a person, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And even Maria says so, like, but she says, you are not like me and I'm not like you. Like, we're different. And he's like, it doesn't matter. Who cares, right? But Maria isn't even convinced that this is something that would keep them apart, because she also sees him as a human being, but she's
Mm-hmm.
more concerned about the way the others might react to it.
Yeah. It also like you said, it kind of breaks a little bit of this idea because at this point it's like, oh, we only think of interracial more as like a white and black thing, and it's like no, it can be Latino with Asian, it can be
Yeah.
black with black with Asian. It's like all these different things, and it's kind of breaking this mold. And it's like, but it always comes down to like the idea is like it's the only thing that should matter is the two people in the relationship, but instead it always comes down to know how are they gonna think about us and what are they gonna think about like us being from these two different worlds and being able to be together. And it's like maybe we're not, and like that's one of the biggest factors driving their whole star-crossed lover uh, story is that like it's what everybody else thinks. It's not about really about us. It's because we know that we love each other, but they don't want us together, and a lot of it has to do because we're not the same people.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to bring up before we get out of here?
I
Anything you
don't
want to
know.
bring
I
up
mean,
for the
there's
remake?
from the remake. Okay.
It's gonna take a long time for
Um.
me to get to the remake. I'll tell you that right now. I'm probably not
Yeah,
gonna get to
I
watch.
get that.
Yeah.
There's one thing. There's one thing I really liked about the remake, and it's not. I haven't seen anyone talk about this because I don't know if I'm weird for noticing it, but in the scene where Maria is getting her new like dress for the party,
Mhm.
she's like in her slip, like in basically like 1960s underwear,
Mhm.
and she's putting on the dress, and they shoot that scene from behind, so you see her back, and something that I have never seen, and I don't know if that's the case for you, but I've never seen a Latina actress that has or is allowed to show the hair that Latinas have on their back.
You're right.
I have
You're right.
never, never, ever
Yeah, so
seen.
motherfucking arm hair
Yep,
is yeah,
I
yeah,
have never seen ever a Latina actress in a movie when you can see her back and you can see hair on her back,
yeah.
like
I,
down the neck,
makes me
on the like the
wonder. Yeah,
nose. You never see it, and I because I saw West Side Story, like the remake, I saw it on like the cinema, the big screen,
yeah,
and I noticed that, and I was like, huh, like this might be the first time
yeah,
that I have ever seen a Latina actress with hair on her back in a movie.
yeah,
And that was very shocking to me. I was like, wait a second, I need a moment for this because
yeah,
it's shocking that in years and all the Latina icons that
yeah.
we have never seen this ever. And it's natural and it's normal. And she's 18 in the 60s. She wouldn't have been shaving her back,
No, no.
obviously.
She
So,
probably shaving her legs. She ain't shaving her back.
yes, of course. And her arms as well.
Yeah. Oh my
So,
God, the
this is
arms.
obviously like, yeah, I mean, this is just a thing of the actress. Like, they obviously didn't want to change her body, of course. But the point is that most Latina actresses do that. And it sucks.
Yeah,
Um, so that I don't know if I'm weird for noticing that because I've never seen anyone bring it up in discussions or anything. But I think it's I don't want to say groundbreaking, but it's important. Like it's new.
yeah, yeah. It's like kind of goes to show like this, and also just kind of breaks the barriers of what like women's bodies look like. And it's like they have hair
Yeah,
too. Like guys like
yep,
especially Latinos, y'all. Like, if you ever
yeah,
gone to school, yeah, damn, you're gonna see the hair on the arms, man. Like it's there, and it's
yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
I think that's interesting. I've never seen the remake, so it's gonna be a while since I get to watch it, but until I get to watch it, but wow, the fact that you get to show hair, like that's actually like a really big thing that I didn't expect the movie to go into.
Yeah, and I mean it's just like a really casual thing. It's not that they're trying to show it. It's
Yeah,
like a 1 second thing, but you can see it. So that's I
makes me
think
wonder
that's
if that was
the
intentional
most
or
like
not. Makes me wonder if Spielberg made that was intentional, and we're
yeah,
like, oh, like I didn't really pay attention to that, and be like, wow, what you didn't pay attention to was such a big Latina like iconic thing for them.
yeah, because I mean, I was in London when I watched this, so I had no one to like discuss this situation with the hair because they obviously most people wouldn't know. But I don't think it was intentional because it was just like a 1 second like casual shot of her back being seen, and then Anita comes and puts the dress on her, and
Yeah.
that's it. So it's just like there, and that's what it is, and it's fine, and that's it. They didn't make like anything out of it. But I saw it and it was like, huh, okay.
All right. Well, that concludes our conversation today. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure, and I just season two has been this big thing that I've been doing, and it's been taking me a long time. But we got to do all your episodes, and I really enjoyed them. We did some good movies here. I can't wait to see what we do with the next one when we talk about your pick. But for now, this is it. This is you're gone for a bit, and you'll be back in the next season. But whenever I get to finally work on that, but yeah, just thank you so much, Alejandra. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I love having you on, and it's just always
Yeah, thank
interesting
you.
to hear your insight. And I know that we love talking. And I'm looking at my time here. We still went long. We still went long. So it happens. Yeah, and I tried my best, but we both love to talk.
Yeah, I think we just have to accept it now.
Yeah, yeah. What happens when you put the two people who love to talk together and just what's it called, make them do this thing where you're supposed to talk a lot. So yeah, we're just gonna have to accept it. All our episodes are gonna be long, but I really enjoyed having you on here. You want to let them know where they can find you on the internet and all that wonderful stuff?
I mean, I changed my username now, so that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
So now I'm on Twitter and Instagram as at Miss Ali Karenina, like Anna Karenina from the book. And that's it. I think those are my most prominent ones.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Y'all go ahead and try to spell that because it's gonna be what's it called interesting how you like. It took me a while to be able to find the ad for her when the first episode of when the episode for In the Heights dropped, and I was like, wait, what the fuck? How do you spell this shit?
Yeah,
but
but I changed it. I changed it now to something more accessible, I think.
yeah, you did.
Uh,
Yeah, it's not Alec call me
so should be
Petza.
easy.
But I appreciate you for
Yeah.
being here, and of course you can keep up to date with me on everything that I'm doing on social media by following me at the Nerd Chicano on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube. Whew, no, no, well, if you're on YouTube, you're listening to me here, so you please make sure you're catching me up to date on here. Um, Letterboxing on Serialized. And of course, if you want to get this episode early before anybody else gets to listen to it or watch it, please make sure you go over to patreon.com/the Nerdy Chicano, and you can get a early access to this by pledging to one of our tiers there. And I would really appreciate you all if you did that. If you're on YouTube, like I said before, I stumbled on my words because I do that a lot. Make sure that you leave a like on this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you leave a wonderful, well, not leave it, but just make sure you hit the what's it called, the notification bell so you don't miss a single piece of content that drops on the channel. And if you're listening to this on the audio side of things like Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, please leave a 5-star review. It would help me out a lot as well and gets this podcast to just more ears and more people out there. So appreciate you all so much. We're nearing the end, y'all. We're almost there. So we're going to have some more films coming up and some more people coming on to talk about them. But for now, we're saying goodbye to the wonderful Alejandra, and we will see her in season 3 of Cinema Condition. But for now, to my wonderful cinephiles and renowned scholars, celebrate the love of cinema today, tomorrow, and every day. Catch you all next time, guys. Bye.